again, it didn't relate to these Americans. President Obama didn't know who these Americans were we were investigating. It was about what the Russians did. And we're sitting around the Oval Office near the fireplace, and the Director of National Intelligence is briefing President Obama, and he explains all this to them, what I just told you about the 3 goals. Then he says, Mr. President, there's some additional material that is salacious in nature, but we think it's important to alert the incoming president to. And the president says, what's that material? And he says, well, it involves prostitutes and allegations that Mr. Trump was involved with unusual activities with prostitutes in 2013 in Moscow, and that the Russians captured images of that to be able to use it to coerce the president, Mr. Trump. And then he says, we're going to do that for 3 reasons. We don't keep secrets from the President of the United States. We know this, so we think he needs to know. Second, we think the media is about to run with this. We don't want the guy caught cold by it. And third, if there's anything to it, and we don't know there's anything to it, one of the things that disarms a foreign adversary is you tell the target of influence that we all know about it, which reduces the Russians' ability to use it as leverage. So President Obama listens to all this, and then he says, what's the plan for that briefing? And Director Clapper says, well, Jim is going to do it. And he says, Jim, meaning me, Jim is going to stay behind in a private session with Mr. Trump and tell him about this. And President Obama, who like President Bush used humor in really good ways, doesn't say a word, just levels his gaze at me and raises and lowers both eyebrows. And I actually heard in my head, you poor bastard. But it comforted me. It shouldn't have, but it comforted me. And then we went up the next day to Trump Tower. We did the main briefing, and I stayed behind and did the prostitute.
Tell us about that.
So it was awkward. At first it began with President-elect Trump talking about how awesome I am. He heard incredible things, and I know everybody at the FBI loves you, and boy, I hope you're going to stay. And I said, I intend to, sir. And my wife said, why didn't you say thank you? And I said, because I have a 10-year term. I intend to stay. And then I said, Mr. President, there's some material that we didn't want to talk about in the bigger group that I want to alert you to. And then I start describing it. And it went off the rails like right away. Because the President-elect got very defensive. Prostitutes, do I look like a guy that needs prostitutes? And which I assume was a rhetorical question. So
And the germaphobe issue?
Well, the germaphobe.
What happened the next day?
He called me after that saying, another reason you know I wouldn't do that is the allegation, which I hate to even repeat for you, is that people were peeing on each other on the bed at the presidential suite.
A specific bed?
Yeah, the bed that the Obamas had slept in. The Ritz-Carlton in Moscow. The allegation is that then Private Citizen Trump wanted this done there to soil this bed in some way, which I guess it did if it happened. And so he calls me the next day, and I remember exactly where I was, because it was dark, and I'm standing in the evening looking out the window, and I can see the FBI director's window. I can see the Washington Monument, and I can actually see the Trump Hotel off to my right. And he's explaining to me that he never stayed overnight in Moscow. And because I had said to him at the end of this thing, by the way, we're not investigating you. I just want you to know this for your benefit, and because we think it's going to come out in the press. That all doesn't do any good. So he calls me after that and says, I didn't stay overnight, and another reason you know it's not true, I'm a germaphobe. I would never let people pee on each other near me. So of course, like you, I'm thinking, wow, it's the presidential suite. You could be at a safe distance. True story. I hate to even say that to you, but that was in my head. So I did not say it. I just said nothing. And he finished, and I hung up, and I went to find my chief of staff to say the frickin' world has gone insane.
And then, I think a week or so later, if you could see the screen, right? This happens. Rob. Oh. Now you happen to wear.
So he stops on me and he says, Director Comey, he's more famous than me. Come here. Oh my God. And so my wife says to the kids, they're watching this at home, says, oh, there's Dad's oh shit face. the room, walking across the room. I mean, I'm a long stride, so it didn't take long. It felt like forever for me. And then I refused. He tried to pull me in to hug me, and I wouldn't let him, and it turned out to be worse because everyone in the world thought he kissed me. And that camera angle, and he actually just whispered in my ear, "I really look forward to working with you." And then he kind of tried to get me to stay up there with him, and I kind of backed off and went back.
And 5 days later, he calls you up.
Invites me to dinner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the famous or infamous loyalty dinner.
Yep.
You want to
Yeah.
talk about that?
Ah. Not really, but I will. So he calls me at my desk, and on the lunch on Friday, and says, "You want to come over for dinner?" I said, I had a date actually with my wife. I didn't say that. I just said, "Certainly, sir." And he said, "Because if tonight's not good, I'm here all weekend."
Which is so bizarre, right? To just
Totally bizarre. Yeah, remember what I
how
talked
many times
about?
did you have dinner with Obama alone?
0. Trump, I mean,
This is 5 days into it.
Bush, 0. It's just not done. The last time it was done was when Richard Nixon and J. Edgar Hoover would have drinks together. And we as a country have tried to make sure it doesn't happen since then. So anyhow, I'll skip through this. I finally convinced myself that it was a group dinner, that it was going to be other leaders of national security agencies. That's okay. The president can meet in a group, that's cool. And I get over there and I get to the front of the green room in the main floor of the White House, and I look in, and there's a little table, not much bigger than this, and I can see it says Director Comey on one card. Again, not a great investigator, but now I know it's just the two of us. And he comes in and we have dinner, and at the early part of the dinner, he begins the dinner by saying, "So what do you want to do?" And, "Sir?" And he said, "Well, I would understand, given the abuse you've taken, if you wanted to walk away, but that would make it look like you've done something wrong. And I hear great things about you. Jeff Sessions says great things about you. Jim Mattis says great things about you. But what do you want to do?" And I said, "Sir, I intend to continue to serve in the job. I love the job." And I explained why. And then he says, looks me, I think, over the salad and says, "I need loyalty. I expect loyalty." And it so threw me that all I could think of to do was stare at the man. And so I just stared at him. And a little voice inside my head said, "Don't blink, don't look, don't move, don't blink." And so it lasted probably 2 seconds, maybe 3. It was a really long time in a one-on-one dinner at a little table. And then he broke the stare and looked and went back down and started eating. And then I knew he was coming back to it. And then an hour and a half later, he came back to it. And in the interim, I kept trying to interrupt him, which is what you really had to do to speak to President Trump, to explain to him why the separation is so important and why presidents over American history have made a mistake. And I said, "Mr. President, it's a paradox. Presidents think trouble comes from the justice institutions, so they try and hold them close. And it always makes it worse." And then that didn't do any good. He came back at the end and said, "Yeah, but I need loyalty." And I said, "I will always be honest with you." And there was a long pause. And he said, "Yeah, that's what I want, honest loyalty." So look, I'll be truthful with you. I don't think I handled this as well as I could have, because I was desperate to get out of this conversation. I probably should have given it another shot or another stare or something, but I paused and I convinced myself, which is easy to do, I suppose, that I had said enough in the hour and a half that he knew what I was like, and I just said, "That you'll get from me." And I emphasized that emphasized it was honest loyalty, and I was out of it.
And fast forward now a couple weeks, and you're in the White House, and he clears the room.
Yeah, Valentine's Day. He kicked everybody out of the room after a terrorism briefing that he really didn't pay attention to. He was distracted. And I said some really scary stuff, and he didn't ask any questions. And at the end, he said, "I just want to talk to Jim." And then the Attorney General tried to stay, and he kicked him out and said, "Thanks, Jeff, thanks. Just want to talk to Jim." And I work for the Attorney General, as you probably know. And then Jared Kushner tried to stay, and he did the same to him. "Thanks, Jared, thanks." And then we had a conversation that included him asking me to drop the investigation of Michael Flynn, who the day before had been fired. And he said, "He's a good guy. I hope you'll let it go." And I, in the moment, the only thing to say, "I agree, he's a good guy." was it.
And do you believe, I know you've been asked this question, but do you believe that's an obstruction charge? Is that worthy of an obstruction charge?
I don't know. It could be. I mean, that was my worry about it. I went back and immediately talked to the FBI team. It could be, but it requires me to see things I can't see, which is what's inside his head. Corruption is a specific intent crime in the federal system. You have to act with what's called corrupt intent. So you have to be thinking about an investigation and intending to obstruct it. And I don't know what was in President Trump's
Take us to the day in California.
Yeah. May the 9th, 2017, I was in Los Angeles to do a diversity recruiting event to try and recruit more people of color to the FBI, which was working. And I had time, so I walked around the whole LA office shaking hands. And then I gathered a group of employees that didn't have offices, so I couldn't shake their hands. They were the janitorial staff. And they were gigantic training room. They sat near me, and I stood talking to them about the mission of the FBI. And then I saw, as I talked, on the back wall, which I didn't pay attention to, were 3 television screens on to news networks. And then as I'm reaching what I thought was a pretty inspirational part of my speech, I look up and it says, Comey resigns. And so I don't know whether you know FBI people, but FBI people are pretty damn funny. So I thought it was a scam. And so I turned to the FBI leadership in LA and I said, that took a lot of work. And I don't know how you are with pranks. You try to be good natured, but not overreact so they get the joy out of you freaking out. And so I kept rolling. And I said to the employees, you've chosen a different kind of work. You've chosen work with moral content. That's what this is, no matter what you do here. And then I looked up and it said, Comey fired on all these screens. And I knew they wouldn't go there. And now the employees know I'm distracted, and so they're turning around. I said, look, I don't know whether that's true or not. I'm going to go find out right now. But it doesn't change what I want to do. I just want to thank each of you for being part of this. So I shook each hand, and I go across this big room, and my wife calls. I go into a little office, says, have you been fired? I said, I don't know. So the kids say it's all over the internet. I said, I don't know. So I call my assistant, Althea James. I said, Althea, what's up? She said, boss, I don't know what's up. She tells me there was a guy knocking on the FBI door, which we don't open, down on Pennsylvania Avenue, saying he has a letter from the president for me. And the FBI cops, who deal with a lot of wingnuts, I guess it makes sense in this context, but they are not having any of it, because it's clearly a disturbed person. And so, long story short, she gets the letter, she reads it to me on the phone, I've been fired. And so I had to decide, I know this seems selfish, but my first question for myself was, how do I get home? Came on an FBI aircraft, I don't work for the FBI anymore. How do I get home? So I left that to them to sort out.
And actually, Andrew McCabe let you fly.
He did, but the head of my details whispered to me, sir, we'll put you in handcuffs if we have to take you back with us.
And Trump was not happy with McCabe for allowing you to fly back on the FBI plane.
He was furious. He called Andy and said he wanted an investigation. And he said, I don't need an investigation. I authorized it. We're responsible for that man's safety. And the plane has to come back. And the security detail has to come back. And so I authorized it. And the president was furious at him. Said some abusive things about his wife, and then issued an order that I've not talked about publicly. He banned me from FBI property, ever. So I have not been back to the FBI. That meant my staff had to box my stuff up like I was dead and bring it to my house.
That's not what, that wasn't in the book.
No. And so I still have not been back in the FBI since I was fired at the headquarters building.
So, having said all that, you don't believe impeachment is the right thing. Go through that.
Yeah.